darkness.
And now for something completely different. Now I know what you're thinking. Eddie, you're nuts. You've lost it. Surely today is the worst time to invest in Irish residential property. Now, the Idiot's Guide to Investing in Property tells us that rule number one, now there's 3 rules. Rule number 1 is location, location, and location. That's true. But the second rule is cash, cash, and cash. Because if you run out of cash, you're in very serious trouble. You see, to pay off the mortgage debt, you need the highest rental yield you can get. And that's, of course, the rent divided by the cost of buying the property for stay. So the third rule in the Idiot's Guide is about gearing, using the least of your own cash and as much of the banks as you can. So let me give you an example. I'm going to split the studio in 2. I'll go over here first to this crowd over here because they look very intelligent. And I'm going to give you €1 million. Now, have any of you had €1 million before? No, you're lying. There's a few millionaires there, is there? Anyway, so let's say that you have €1 million and you buy a property for €1 million in cash. And a year later, it's been revalued at €1.1 million. So you've made a profit of 10%. Will you remember that? 10%. You can pat yourselves on the back. Now, this crowd over here get €1 million in cash as well. But instead of putting the entire €1 million on one property, you put just in €100,000. And then you borrow €900,000 from the bank. A year later, your property has been valued at €1.1 million. So you've made a profit now of 100%, less the cost of borrowing. Now I can hear the dolls saying, hold on a second now. Both sides of the studio made 100 grand each. That's true. Except this crowd over here could buy up to 10 different properties. And that's the difference in gearing. But gearing, of course, is like rocket fuel. It propels you up in a rising market, but can bring you crashing to earth in flames in a falling market. Now, the higher the rent you can get, the least amount of your own cash is needed for the deal. Remember, generating cash is very hard because it's our scarcest resource. And the ideal balancing trick is to position the rent to wash the face of the mortgage. But here's the problem. In Ireland, the rental yields, that's the rent as a percentage of the cost of buying a property, is very, very small. It's 3% and it's getting smaller. Whereas the cost of borrowing money, mortgages, is going in the other direction. And very shortly, mortgage finance will cost around 5% or so. In order to make the deal self-financing, you therefore have to put in a huge amount of cash. So right now, the residential investment market is not a good idea for the new investor. But the big question lots of us fail to ask ourselves before we take the plunge to become a residential investor is, am I a landlord? Well, you're not. You're not a landlord if you don't rule over property supplements. You have meat left at the end of your chicken leg after eating. You like people, particularly migrants, students, and welfare recipients. You can match curtains and colours. And you think the Fianna Fáil tent was where Brian Boru was killed. Now here's the good news. You can still invest in property through a whole plethora of property funds that have become available in recent years. And they come in all shapes and sizes. And they can take a minimum of around €20,000 to get into one. The trick is to invest a little bit of your own money with other people and then use gearing to get a slice of the action in some of the biggest property deals in the world. So you use other people's expertise with other people's money. Now, there's good and bad out there, so you have to look very carefully at the fine print for the high cholesterol charges. And here's my tip. Whenever you get a prospectus from one of these funds, you never start at the first page. You always start at the back page and read forward, because they always try to hide the nasty stuff on the back page. On the other hand, if you see a full, clear, upfront statement of the costs and the risks, that's usually a good sign of honest dealers. Now, there is a third way to invest in property that lots of people don't know about. And that's you invest in property PLCs. They're companies quoted on the stock market, and you can do so for as little as a few €1,000. Now, that means you're not investing in property directly. You're actually investing in shares in some of the biggest property companies quoted on the stock market who are involved in a lot of developments, land as well as buy and lets throughout Europe, for example. But the beauty of investing in PLCs is that if there is a property market fallout, you can sell quickly and get out because it's a liquid investment. Whereas if you invest in funds or in property directly, you can get caught in a falling market. Of course, some of us will be splashing out on other things that go up and down as well, which brings us to the next one.